So welcome everyone to this, our first panel discussion of what is now Self-Help Africa's and United Purpose's second series of Science for Development webinars, with which we aim to celebrate noteworthy young scientist projects from this year's event and hope to inspire young scientist projects to have more of a global and climate justice focus in future competitions and exhibitions. My name is Aaron, and I'm part of the Self-Help Africa Global Citizenship Education team. And we, along with United Purpose and our partners, Irish Aid, have the privilege each year of facilitating the Science for Development Award at the BT Young Scientist exhibition. And every year gets to be inspired by the wealth of innovation contained in the projects and the depth of understanding students demonstrate for real challenges facing the most vulnerable of the world's communities and ecosystems. So let's get started with the focus of this webinar, which is looking at the category of biological and ecological sciences. On the panel with us today, we're lucky enough to have our 2022 winning team of the Science for Development Award. And they are Jona, Claudine and Iman from St. Louis Secondary in Dundalk. Hello to you all.
Hi.
Hi there, great. We also have a past winner of the award, Jack O'Connor, whose project won in 2017 and is now in his final year studying international business at Limerick University, but he's actually coming to us from Budapest, I've learned. So hi, Jack.
Hi, Aaron. Hi, everybody. How are we all doing?
Great. Good to have you. And then finally on the panel, we have joining us from Dakar in Senegal, we have Tim Keller, the West African Regional Director for United Purpose and Self-Help Africa. Hi, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So a big thank you to you all for making time for this. And I'm sure what you have to share will create a rich resource for students and teachers to delve into. So if I go back to our winners, our current winners in Dundalk, we had the Science for Development showcase in Dublin recently with other selected projects from other schools. We had it in Ivy House in the centre of Dublin, and the Minister for International Development was there. So can I ask one of you there briefly, how was this experience for you of the showcase?
I think it was really great. It was such an amazing experience, such a unique and unforgettable experience, because we had a chance to see so many amazing projects and got to have a chance to speak to all the other students that were there, all the other participants, especially during this time. Really, it was really heartwarming to get to have a chance to talk to them. It was such a heartwarming experience to meet all of them and discuss with similar-minded people as well, and see that we weren't the only ones as well who are concerned with these problems of the world that we have.
Wonderful, great, great. I'm very glad you enjoyed the day, and like say, you had a chance to meet like-minded students doing projects in the same field, or at least focusing, like you say, on these real-world problems and challenges beyond our experience in Ireland. And Jack, if I can ask you to cast your mind back to 2017, and as part of the winning the award, you and your teammate Dermot got to travel to our program in Malawi. Is this still a vivid memory for you?
It is. It's even though this morning I realized it's been half a decade. It's which is, you know, when you get to that stage, it's the memory may start getting hazy, but certainly isn't the case with the field trip to Malawi. Honestly, one of the most impactful experiences of my life, and I can say that with absolute certainty. I suppose one main lasting memory for me personally was we got to test our project. We got to bring our project onto the field to work with smallholder farmers on the ground in the lead and follow farms. And getting to speak with farmers firsthand and actually test our project, it showed us not only that the project worked, which was a great benefit for us, but that there was a distinct need for it. And that fueled the journey that the project has taken since then. And none of that would have been possible without the immersion and the experience of the trip to Malawi. So very, very fond memories of that trip.
Great to hear that experience, and all being well, fingers crossed, our students in St. Louis will get to experience such a trip as part of winning the Science for Development Award. That brings us nicely back to Tim, who is in one of our program countries. And like I say, he's the regional director for the whole of West Africa and based in Senegal. Just briefly, Tim, what's Senegal and Dakar like?
It's a wonderful place to live. I've lived in 3 or 4 different countries in the region, and this is by far my favorite. Dakar's a wonderful city full of entrepreneurs, scientists, and people coming up with solutions to the world's problems. So it's a really exciting place to be.
Great. We're going to hear a lot more about Senegal and the region from Tim shortly. But before that, let's go back to our winners so that we can hear some more about their project. So the winning project was titled, or is titled, a renewable and electricity-free cooling system for food refrigeration that can combat world hunger. That was their title. So with a title like that, you can see how it caught our eye as it being very relevant to the criteria of Science for Development Award. You go on to describe your project we aim to investigate the effects of a renewable cooling system driven by sunlight and salt water on food refrigeration, which could help end world hunger. Can we have from one of you maybe an overview of your experiments and your conclusions?
Really 2 experiments. The very first experiment that we had to perform was determining the best type of salt that we would have to use to produce the best cooling effect. So we tested NPK fertilizer, tested calcium ammonium nitrate, which is also a type of fertilizer, tested regular table salt, and urea. The design is basically something like this, where I'm not sure if you could see it properly, but it was 3 beakers inside each other. And in the innermost beaker was our food sample, which is milk, and it's placed inside another beaker, which contained a brine solution. And then this was placed then in a bigger beaker containing our salt water mixture. So we tested all these different salts and checked over an hour. So each 10-minute interval, we would test the temperature of the milk. The lowest temperature we got with the best performing salt, which was calcium ammonium nitrate and urea, was around 1.8 Celsius. So that was our first experiment. Using this, we had to conduct a second experiment to confirm that if this would actually be viable to be used as a refrigerant to keep food cold. So we tested milk, fish, and meat. We set it out in 3 different sets. One was in room temperature, one was in the fridge, and one was in our cooling system. In the end, we found out that the food set, which was placed in our cooling system, was just as effective as the refrigerated set, and it kind of proved that this salt can be used to store food and to keep it cold for safe temperatures for human consumption. It's also reused actually through the use of sunlight. Can be reused up to 3 times if you would just let it evaporate, let all the moisture with the salt evaporate under sunlight.
The resources, the minerals you're using are reusable. You can regenerate the properties again and requiring no electricity. Brilliant, which is really impressive, and what makes it relevant for our award and of great interest, the fact that it's a scientific approach to a problem, but it's renewable, it's affordable, it's accessible, and it doesn't rely on electricity, which is what normal refrigeration requires. But your project is framed around the issue of world hunger. So how did you come up with that focus for your research project?
I actually grew up in Africa where I could see it firsthand, and we basically came up with the idea that we should find a solution for the problem, which is food refrigeration. And we basically took the ideas with the beauty petition.
We also noticed the huge problem in food waste. And so we kind of worked back and said, well, what was one of the roots, the causes of food waste in the first place? And we found that there was the lack of cold storage.
Brilliant. Yeah. You covered a lot there that is very prevalent to the work that Self-Help Africa and United Purpose do, and looking at how to increase incomes for farming communities, and that is connected to reducing losses. And like you say, a lot of harvests are lost due to inadequate storage. So this is an area that's of great need and usefulness. And then, like you say, the way of keeping things safe, avoiding people getting sick by keeping things properly cooled, and so that they last longer as well, so that people's foods, once they've bought them, don't go to waste. Like all the best ideas, it's really simple, straightforward, and requires very little technology.
Hello, my name is Jona Garcia.
I'm Iman, Shittu.
And I'm Claudine Mulihano.
And our project is a renewable and electricity-free cooling system for food refrigeration that can help combat world hunger.
By 2050, there will be nearly 10 billion mouths to feed, and currently a third of all food is wasted worldwide. In developing countries alone, 40% of food loss occurs after harvest and early in the supply chain, which is mostly because of inadequate food storage.
Without electricity, there is no cold storage to enable the transformation of lives of small farmers who suffer because of food waste and are most vulnerable to climate change.
This cooling system we have designed only consists of salt and water. Over the past few weeks, we have tested different salt types,
such as sodium chloride, calcium ammonium nitrate, NPK fertilizer, and urea. And in the end, we found out that if you mix calcium ammonium nitrate and urea, it produced the best and prolonged cooling effect compared to the rest.
Originally, ammonium nitrate would be our chosen salt, but due to its explosive qualities and its lack of availability, it was not practical for use.
This works through an endothermic process. As salt dissolves in water, it takes in the heat from the environment, which cools it down. Our setup involves a tin can with your food sample in it, surrounded by an 80% brine solution, which prolongs the cooling effect, and then finally surrounded with your salt and water mixture.
The salt can be reused with sunlight and evaporation. We took 3 sets of meat, fish, and milk. 1 set was placed in the refrigerator, 1 was in our cooling system, and 1 was in the room temperature.
We took swabs from each set on day 1, 3, and 5.
We left the agar dishes for a week and compared them. The set from the refrigerator had a bit of bacteria growth, and the one left in the room temperature had a lot. The set in our cooling system had only a little bit more, but not too many bacteria growth than the refrigerated set.
Our findings show that our cooling system design has the potential to help remote regions,
to reduce food waste, and to help fight world hunger.
Okay, so thanks for that. I'd like to move on to Jack, our past winner from 2017, who with his friend Dermot came up with a tool to aid planting seeds and seedlings. We're going to see some images of this planter, which again, I think this leads on so well from what the girls have done and are talking about there, the students in Dundalk, about what seems incredibly simple idea, but actually there's a lot more to it. So I'll let you, Jack, can you give us a brief overview of your planter?
Of course. So I suppose what you can see there before the sunburn started properly setting in on me is holding prototype 1 of the handheld seed planter. So as you said, like a lot of the ideas that kind of focus on come from issues that may seem simple but have certain complexities to it. So the entire premise of this project, the handheld seed planter, was to eliminate the need for bending over when planting seeds. We'd seen a number of documentaries from our time within second level education of farmers having to bend over, stoop down. And it was a very labor intensive process just to, do a very basic function that we felt was, of planting seeds. Now, for a number of different reasons, availability of farm animals, automation, farm machinery isn't a sustainable option for these farmers. So they're forced to, operate in conditions like that. So we decided to, try and come up with something that would first and foremost eliminate that need for bending over. And that's what you see there with the initial prototype of the planter. We tested it back in Ireland, tested it for the young scientists. And, on paper and certainly the exhibition, it did exactly what we set out to do. You could plant seeds without having to bend over. But, we found a couple of more, perhaps new solutions and like new added benefits for that. And as well as that, a couple of more constraints, which I'd be happy to talk about, further in this conversation from our trip in Malawi, the field trip that you're seeing photographs of there. But that's kind of the initial premise of the project back in 2017.
So you can see from what I've seen of it, it's a tube and the seed or the plant, the seedling can go through the tube, but at the bottom it's also breaking the soil. Mm-hmm. And I know you went through a few different prototypes using different materials, and then you've gone on to a very impressive pilot program with farmers in Malawi just in 2019. So maybe tell us a little bit about the different materials you explored and then how this pilot study went.
I always laugh when we talk about prototypes because it's very much a love-hate relationship with it. You hear of people having to test out lots of different ways and lots of different ways not working. And I know myself, I didn't fully believe it could be that complicated. The answer is yes, it can be that complicated when you're trying to come up with new prototypes and new designs. So from our trip in Malawi, with self-help, we were chatting with farmers on the ground, as you can see in the photographs. And one thing that was consistently being said was to investigate using bamboo instead of metal, which seemed like a pretty obvious choice. Bamboo was, much more widely abundant, widely available in these regions, certainly than, metal and the stainless steel that we were using. And as well as that, it would reduce the costs, easier to manufacture, easier to, it was a more sustainable and just a more practical option, really. So we went through a number of different prototypes. We didn't go on to bamboo straight away. We looked at wavin piping, various types of plastics for a small phase, and that got ruled out very quickly. And we finally settled on testing it on bamboo. Thankfully, it worked. Very natural and very sustainable and very cost efficient solution, which led us to kind of warrant looking into testing it somewhat at scale. So for us, we wanted to test a number of different things with this pilot program. We wanted to test, does this prototype and does this process more so eliminate the need for bending over, the initial, idea for the young scientist? Does it improve the effectiveness of planting, and does it improve the efficiency or the speed of planting? So those are kind of our three premises as well. But we kind of wanted to go beyond that. A big thing I kind of learned over my past couple of years within university, within extracurricular activities, is kind of the benefits of local value creation. So we wanted to see, was there a method in which we could actually have the planters produced and created by, let's say, local blacksmiths on the ground in the regions that we were operating in the southwest of Malawi, the Chihuahua region. So there was a couple of different factors at play that we really wanted to test. And that's where the pilot program came about. We targeted to work with 100 farmers, to get us good quality data that we could actually rule in and rule out. Does the planter work? And does the manufacturing and distribution process work? And, that kind of stemmed on, that was more like a social innovation style thing as opposed to, necessarily a young scientist project. And that's exactly what we tested. We worked with a charity partner, and we were fortunate enough to get a couple of, pretty solid funding partners to help push the program through. And we did exactly that, came up with a couple of test prototypes here in Ireland, with a metal head, which could be easily attached and removed to a bamboo pole or a bamboo stalk. And then we shipped them out to Malawi. We shipped them out to the Chihuahua district, worked with a local blacksmith on the ground to produce 100 of these, 100 more of them. And again, just tried out the whole process, handed it out to, to farmers to testing. Again, a very scientific process, trying, failing. Far more failures than I was certainly hoping for at the start. It's certainly along this journey at least. But what we found was eventually it actually accomplished those three things. It improved the effectiveness, it improved the efficiency, and it eliminated the need for bending over. We conducted a number of pretty in-depth interviews with some of the farmers, and a couple of testimonials as well. If we have time, happy to share. But we found that 87% reported an improvement in effectiveness, and that 97% reported a reduction in labor intensity, and that 94% were looking to work with us in the future and would recommend it to more farmers. So I think to have that off the back of a pilot program, an initial pilot program, was certainly, we weren't expecting results that good, apologies. If we were getting maybe the 60% mark, that would have been good for us as prototype one of a program as opposed to a planter. But I suppose having that kind of spurred us on to realize that there is an actual need there from our original idea, or from our original, as we call it, hypothesis, that was created as a young scientist and backed up heavily and kind of exposed the flaws in it through that immersion trip in Malawi with self-help. So that's kind of the pilot program and how it operated.
Amazing, really amazing, and it kind of shows what can come from a project idea. So the students in St. Louis, maybe, there's a lot of distance you can go with your refrigeration unit if you want to. Because I think, Jack, it's fair to say you created a company.
Yeah, so a non-profit organization. It's to help, I suppose, more on the innovation side of things, for new product development, and I suppose issues that we've kind of seen off the back of A, the immersion trip, and B, the pilot program we conducted ourselves. Insofar as, again, what you mentioned earlier, Aaron, like those seemingly simple issues, which a couple of tweaks needed to be solved. So that's what it's kind of focusing on now at the moment. So it's very exciting to see where it can go. Now that we know it can work, it's much easier now for us to kind of work in a number of different regions. Now that we understand the basics of what needs to be done. And I think that only comes with experience, especially from this journey. It is just engaging in curiosity and just not being afraid of like trying and needing to make improvements and needing to make complete shifts in the entire project sometimes. So it's definitely been a good journey so far.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. That's amazing. You mentioned testimonials there from farmers. Do you have one to hand before we move on? It'd be lovely to hear a response from an actual farmer.
This product has helped us a lot because now we are finding planting our crops much easier. In previous years, we'd have to bend over to plant our crops. It was a very tiresome job. But now we can just stand and plant as we go. To this organization, I'd like to say thank you. What they've done by creating this product has affected our lives incredibly. And I'd ask that they please do not stop any of the work that they're doing, but continue it. As you can see, our maize has grown so well thanks to the new innovative planting material. We have all benefited immensely.
So you can see very briefly there, that's just one testimonial of quite a number we were lucky to develop from the program. But again, it just shows seemingly simple things that start at a science and technology competition can make a very significant difference if you're if you can work with the right people, such as Self-Help Africa and United Purpose, in order to develop these great ideas into projects that can actually make sustainable impact on some people's lives.
That was lovely to see and hear, and I think also it's a good timely reminder when you see a testimonial come up and we're saying a farmer, and even in my mind still I get a moment where I go, oh, it's a woman talking. Here in Ireland in particular, that farmers and farm work is male dominated, but when we talk in Africa in particular, when we're talking about helping farmers, we're talking about helping women. To hear that testimony was very impactful. So thanks very much, Jack.
Thank you.
And I'll move on to Dakar and Senegal and Tim. Maybe Tim, would you like to give us some insights of the programs that you're overseeing and involved with in West Africa?
We specialize in international development. So we use science-based solutions to overcome long-standing challenges that keep people locked in cycles of poverty. In doing that, we tackle environmental challenges such as deforestation, or in particular, in this part of the world, the reduction and destruction of the mangrove forests and the impact that they have on people's health and livelihoods. We also work a lot with food security and nutrition. So we've heard from Jack about planting innovations, and we've heard from the team in St. Louis about storage of food in rural parts of Africa. Food is the dominant feature of life. Most of all functioning hours in the day are about gathering and preparing of food. therefore the storage of it and any innovations that help its effectiveness are what we try and focus on as well, to boost the productivity and livelihoods of the female farmers that we've just heard about. And we also use approaches to food to tackle health challenges. So what I really want to focus on today is 3 examples of our work. One, which we've been doing for a number of years, around science-based solutions to health and food security. Another one, which is an information technology-based solution to the issue of marketing foods for farmers. And the third one is an environmental challenge.
We're hoping that what you're working on and the innovative ways that you're approaching it give students and teachers ideas for research projects. Show us what you're up to.
So this is called a market price information system. But let me just sort of set up the problem a little bit. The women farmers that we've heard about, that are the majority of farmers of horticulture and agricultural crops in rural West Africa, they are farmers, they're not necessarily business people. So we train them in various business skills, in preparing their crops for market, but also in how to get the best price for their crops. Because what normally happens is they produce all their crops, and then a middleman turns up at their farm gate and tells them what they are going to pay for the crops, and they often don't have a choice because they don't own the means of getting their crops to transport. We have looked into coming up with an IT-based solution that we can provide to these female farmers to enhance their ability to get the most money for their crops, which then obviously transfers to them having better livelihoods, sending their girls to school, having better food and facilities for all their family. The problem really is that women don't often have access to the correct prices at the market, and they cannot get to the close markets to get the best prices because they don't own the means of transportation. They are largely not having access to the internet. They are not using smartphones, so they cannot go on to another international or national market-based system to get up-to-date market prices. And even if they did, the majority of these female farmers are illiterate, so they wouldn't really be able to understand this information anyway. We aim to produce an app which sends them the market prices that we collect from all the major markets in the country. And this is Gambia, just to be clear. We also do a similar thing in Senegal, but this is one from Gambia that I'm showing you now. We capture all the main crops in the country. There they are written out there: potatoes, tomatoes, cabbage. We transfer that information into our database. And into our database, we then have people recording voice messages of the crops, of all the products, of all the markets. And then we send that via mobile phone communication networks, in this country, a company called QCell, and we send that information in voice messaging, SMS, to the female farmers around the country. So essentially, they can SMS for free a request to have the up-to-date market prices for tomatoes in their local market as a middleman comes to try and buy from them. Thus, can then check the accurate price so that they can then negotiate a fair price with the middleman. As it happens, I'm talking about middlemen, but as with farmers, most of the middlemen are actually women, called Gender and Jai, and they are the ones who turn up with either trucks or in some cases donkey carts to collect all of the goods. And we've created marketing federations who represent all of these farms in each of the regional levels, and they are now expanding our market system by signing up all of these farmers onto the system. What this does, once they have access to the system, they can know the up-to-date market prices for all the crops, but then they can also track how the crop prices change throughout the year. So initially, they can negotiate a better price for their crops at the farm gate, but then they can adjust their planting to do with the prices year on year. So here in this example, we can see that for tomatoes in 2021, in the Brikama market, which is the largest market in the country, the price of tomatoes skyrocketed between June and August. So that means that farmers can target their crops to be ready for sale at that market between June and August, thus giving these illiterate rural farmers a lot more market information for them to maximize the output of their project. We have also now introduced this system on WhatsApp, because more and more farmers do actually have access to smartphones and the internet. And another thing we are doing right now is we're engaging with the up-to-date climate science to see up-to-date weather forecasts and weather patterns that we can also send to our farmers in voice messaging in local languages. So as we've heard today about food storage, and we've heard about food planting, I thought I'd use another example of our work. And this is a concept called biofortification, which is essentially using food science to improve the nutrition of remote communities. The problem here is that traditional diets can often leave remote communities lacking key elements of a balanced diet. This can, for instance, leaving them iron deficient and needing to go to health centers to get iron boosts. But many people do not have access to health centers in these areas, so they end up suffering from anemia. Basically means that your blood is not producing enough red blood cells, which is particularly risky for pregnant women and women about to give birth, because they are at risk of potentially dying in childbirth or suffering complications that could lead to either the mother or the child dying. There are other areas of anemia that can affect you, but this is a really significant one, because often there is no access to midwives or hospitals for complications in pregnancy. Another problem here is that children that do not get the right amount of nutrients in their diets, either through breast milk or as infants, can be malnourished and leading to stunting, both mental and physical, which was referenced by the St. Louis school project as well. So our solution is to understand the nutrients of food better and to pass that understanding on to the very communities who are producing food. Rather than adding anything to the food, which is known as food fortification, instead we choose an approach called biofortification. This is essentially slightly tweaking the crops that people grow in a natural way, not through genetic modification, but through using nature-based solutions. So for instance, millet is one of the main crops in West Africa, used to produce bread, to produce porridge, and many other things. A slight variant of that, called pearl millet, has 60% more iron in it. They are very similar in the way they're grown, and they're similar in their taste, but the difference is huge in the amount of iron. So what we have done is to introduce different crops, substituting millet for pearl millet, and very similarly, white flesh sweet potato for orange flesh sweet potato. Both of these substitutions, we have worked with farmers. They are happy to make these small changes, the ones they wouldn't quite be happy to make if we were asking them to plant potatoes or something instead of this crop. And with these crops, they have trialed them, and now they are rolling them out in the whole country in Gambia. And in all the communities where these crops are now consumed, there is zero iron deficiency in all of the communities. Not only that, we are seeing much less complications in childbirth. And most importantly, when we do still have occasions where mothers die in childbirth and their children survive, through the combination of pearl millet and orange flesh sweet potato, producing a nutritious, rich porridge, this porridge contains all of the nutrients of mother's milk. So this means that even if a mother is sick or ill or horribly dies in childbirth, the family can bring up that child with all the nutrients that they can possibly need to have a full life. So this is just an example of science-based solutions, but not necessarily inventing a science-based solution, but just using nature's alternative solutions to transform a development problem.
Amazing, and amazing to hear such a dramatic impact of like you say, slight changes of diet, but not imposing a whole new crop to a community. That sounds fantastic and really inspiring, even though it's a very sad area to contemplate that it's happening at all, especially when it's very rudimentary medical facilities that are lacking. So it shouldn't be happening at all, but always quality food and nutrition is vital, as opposed to just filling bellies. So it will have generational effects going forward for those children. Not only will more survive, but they will prosper much better. That's wonderful to hear. I want to go back to our students in Dundalk. If I could ask our 2022 winners of our Science Development Awards, do you plan to continue with your idea, and maybe have you looked at other competitions or options for your project?
We actually have joined a couple of other competitions. The one we're currently working on is called the Clean Tech competition. If we get into round 2, they would give us €200 to actually make a prototype of our system. And then if they really like the way it is and if it really works, they would we would get into the finals. One of the top prizes in this competition is €10,000. And I think this would be a really big help in terms of funding to, further on the project. And we also joined the BT Business Bootcamp. So we actually got to look at a lot of business side of things. And our project was actually one of the main projects entered in the bootcamp. So we plan to maybe use this system as a system in transport, so cooling vans, or even bring it into the air conditioning sector, or even make a full-on refrigerator. In a refrigerator now currently are really bad in terms of emissions. So if we would adapt our renewable system into this, you eliminate all of the emissions that come from modern refrigerators that we have in now. Our main goal with our whole project is really to help these type of countries and these remote and isolated places to remove that gap of not being able to get a proper education. Sorry about that.
Wonderful. That's great. That's great, and really inspiring. And I wish you best of luck with your endeavours with the project. And I'm hopeful, and fingers crossed for my own benefit, that I get to meet you at an airport, maybe in Dublin, heading somewhere in East or West Africa, maybe. And maybe Tim will be at the other end to pick us up. Who knows? That would be a really nice continuation of the journey. So I just want to say thanks for Jack for joining us.
My pleasure.
Very briefly, tell us about how you have ended up representing Ireland at the UN.
Yeah, again, another series of random occurrences, I think. So in 2019, was very fortunate to be selected to represent Ireland at the United Nations, part of their youth delegate program. I was halfway through university, and especially with Mulihano, with the charity, I wanted to have a greater understanding, I suppose, of the wider context and the wider environment that we were operating in. I knew the product and the tech, the tech side of things, the product innovation side of things. I didn't understand how to deliver a project, and I didn't understand why we were experiencing so many roadblocks that we were experiencing. Having, I suppose, the self-awareness that I knew very little of, I suppose, the more over, the bigger context of the wider environment in which we wanted to operate in. And again, having interest in the likes of sustainable development goals. I mean, as you mentioned, I study international business, but I mean, my business practices certainly don't happen all that often, I can guarantee you that. So kind of understanding, perhaps the role of business, or perhaps, role of private sector in whatever capacity, just kind of applied, and it showed me exactly what I was looking to get. First and foremost, it got me the wider knowledge and the wider context to bring back to the team in Mulihano and actually create that pilot program with those understandings that were gained at the UN. And also kind of got to understand, more about sustainable development goals, and I suppose the role of young people in that capacity takes on a lot of different forms, whether it's policy making or advocacy or diplomacy in politics, or in my instance, perhaps product innovation and trying to come up with these projects. It shows that there's a lot of different ways that young people can and should get involved. And I suppose that's kind of my advice as well for anybody on this call interested in applying for the Young Scientist or interested in projects in general. I can guarantee you, when I started out 5 years ago, I didn't expect to be here 5 years later talking about a completed pilot program for handheld seed planters in Malawi. Despite the accent, I'm not actually from a farming background myself. It's so it was certainly a new thing, but just engaging those curiosities and engaging those interests, because that'll help you be as effective as possible.
Brilliant, great pearls of advice there, and that's actually very handy lead in back. If I can go back to one more question to our students in Dundalk, and feel free if you need to go, Jack. Don't hang around. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks very much.
To our team, our winners, I just wonder if you have, after your experience of this previous BT Young Scientist, if you have any advice for students that might be listening or watching this recording and are thinking about entering a project, what advice would you give them?
Our main advice is just really go for it. One of the main problems we had at the very beginning was the cold feet. Should we enter the project? Will it even be good? But the whole process was really, really great. There were so many failures, but so many successes as well. If you have an idea that you think would be worthwhile to study about, to research about, and it would actually help people in the world, just go for it.
Great. Yeah, well, I think that's very valuable information for us all, or advice, as in that failure is part of the process, and that you won't get to a result without trial and error. We live in a society that is very adverse to failure, or allowing people to experiment, explore, and to work through failures to find the end result. So I think that's really valuable for us to all remember. So thanks very much for your time. Thank your teacher and your school for allowing you the time. And then Tim, maybe before we round up, because we're also interested in keeping these great minds like the ones we have on our panel in the sector. So the careers like the career that you have had or are having, with an impressive resume of different countries and different companies, focusing on education, focusing on sport. I read that you've written a book, you've run a school, but always focusing, it seems, very much on social justice. If you can encapsulate, how did you end up working in this sector?
I would say that in general, when I started out, there was a very set path if you wanted to go into this industry, and that was a degree, then a master's from one or two universities in London, and then on to do a volunteering internship. And I'd say that route is not the only route anymore. I think there are a lot of other routes through business, through science, through advertising, through any range of industries now that you can get into international development and social justice work. My route was, I was at university in Bristol, and I did a course in crisis and conflict as part of my politics degree, and came across the Rwanda genocide. And in 1994, and when you come across such a horrific thing that you don't think it's possible that people could perform such barbarity onto people, it did something in my mind that changed me and said, I want to work for a world where things like this don't happen anymore. Because I was 19, and when you're 19, you think you can change the world, and you can. So I set about studying conflict. I did a master's degree in conflict studies, and I ended up going out to Sierra Leone and Liberia, two post-conflict countries, to interview women who were trying to become politicians in this post-conflict environment. And once I saw the power of these women to overcome the challenges that they were facing, their countries were facing after a decade of brutal civil war, I fell in love with the region. I fell in love with this work, and I've been in West Africa for 15 years since then. Like the girls have said, once you have an idea, follow it, commit to it. Just because someone else may have done something similar to you, once you Google it, doesn't mean that your idea will not be better. If I can just give some really specific advice to young inventors, young scientists like yourselves. So when you told me about your example of a salt-based cooling system for food, I immediately thought of the health sides of it. I immediately thought about cooling vaccines, cooling blood, two things that you are currently not able to do in remote health centers. But I would also, whenever you're trying to find a solution to a problem, as a Western-based person, I would always encourage you to look at the traditional-based solutions that people have come up with for generations. People do eat and store fish and meat in rural areas by using smoking. This is a system that has worked successfully for generations and generations. So always look at the existing solutions that people without a science degree have come up with and see what can be gained from that solution. And maybe you can morph your science-based solution with a more traditional-based solution.
Brilliant, Tim. That's fantastic. Yeah, and very important contribution. So thanks for everyone for joining in, and for everyone that's listening in, watching in. This is part of a series, with the first of the different categories that the BT Young Scientist is set on. So we will have similar discussions on the other categories coming up